There's this voice that follows us everywhere. It's there when we wake up in the morning, whispering about the day ahead. It's there when we're stuck in traffic, commenting on every small frustration. It's there when we're trying to fall asleep, replaying conversations from hours or even years ago. This voice never takes a break, never goes on vacation, never gives us a moment of complete silence. Most of the time we don't even notice it's there. It's like the hum of an air conditioner or the distant sound of traffic, so constant that it becomes background noise. But this voice, this inner narrator, is shaping every moment of our experience. It's writing the story of our lives, one thought at a time. The ancient Stoics understood this better than almost anyone. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his personal journal nearly 2,000 years ago, captured it perfectly. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He wasn't talking about controlling the world around us. He was talking about something much more intimate, much more immediate. He was talking about the conversation we're having with ourselves right now, in this very moment. What if that conversation could change? What if the voice that narrates our days could become kinder, wiser, more helpful? What if instead of being our harshest critic, it could become our most trusted friend? The thing about our inner voice is that it learned to speak long before we learned to listen. When we were children, it absorbed the words of parents, teachers, siblings, friends. It picked up phrases from movies, books, overheard conversations. It collected judgments and assumptions like a magnet collects metal shavings. Over time, these fragments formed patterns, and these patterns became our default way of thinking. But here's what's remarkable. Just as we learn these patterns, we can unlearn them. Just as we train this voice to speak in certain ways, we can train it to speak differently. The field of psychology calls this cognitive restructuring, but the Stoics had a simpler way of putting it. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That reaction, that interpretation, that's where our inner voice lives. Think about the last time something didn't go according to plan. Maybe you were running late for an important meeting. Maybe you made a mistake at work. Maybe someone said something that hurt your feelings. In that moment, what did your inner voice say? Did it offer comfort and perspective, or did it pile on with criticism and worry? For most of us, that voice tends to be pretty harsh. It's quick to point out our flaws, slow to acknowledge our strengths. It catastrophizes small problems and minimizes genuine achievements. It compares us to others constantly, usually unfavorably. It replays embarrassing moments like a broken record and rehearses future disasters that may never happen. And this isn't our fault. This voice developed as a survival mechanism, trying to keep us safe by anticipating problems and avoiding social rejection. In our ancestral environment, being cast out from the group could mean death, so our minds evolved to be hypervigilant about potential threats to our social standing. The problem is that this ancient alarm system is still running in our modern world, where most of our daily challenges aren't actually life-threatening. The good news is that we're not stuck with this default programming. We can become aware of our inner dialogue, examine it, and gradually reshape it. This isn't about positive thinking or pretending everything is fine when it isn't. It's about developing a more balanced, more realistic, more compassionate way of talking to ourselves. Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." The beginning of a healthier inner dialogue starts with the end of unconscious mental habits. It starts with paying attention to the voice that's been running in the background all this time. What does it sound like when we really listen? Is it the voice of a wise mentor offering guidance and encouragement? Or is it more like a worried parent, constantly pointing out dangers and inadequacies? Is it the voice of a good friend, someone who believes in us and wants the best for us? Or is it more like a harsh critic, never satisfied, always finding fault. The strange thing is that we would never talk to a friend the way we often talk to ourselves. If a friend came to us with a problem, we wouldn't say, "You're such an idiot for getting into this situation." We wouldn't say, "You always mess everything up." We wouldn't say, "Everyone probably thinks you're a failure." But somehow, when it comes to our own inner dialogue, these kinds of thoughts seem normal, even necessary. Modern psychology has given us tools to understand why this happens. Our brains are pattern recognition machines, constantly looking for familiar themes and narratives. If we grew up hearing certain messages, about our worth, our capabilities, our place in the world, our inner voice learned to repeat those messages. Even if those messages weren't accurate or helpful, they became familiar, and familiarity feels like truth. But familiarity isn't truth. Just because we've been thinking something for a long time doesn't make it valid. Just because a thought feels automatic doesn't mean it's accurate. This is where the work begins, learning to question our own mental habits, to examine our thoughts with the same curiosity we might bring to examining an interesting rock or a beautiful flower. Marcus Aurelius practiced this kind of mental examination every day. His meditations are essentially a record of him questioning his own thoughts, challenging his assumptions, and reminding himself of what really matters. He wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." Not because the past and future don't exist, but because the present is where our power lies. Right now, in this moment, we can choose how to interpret what's happening. We can choose what story to tell ourselves. This choosing isn't always easy. Sometimes our thoughts feel so real, so urgent, so obviously true that questioning them seems pointless. When we're anxious about a presentation at work, the thought, "I'm going to embarrass myself," can feel like a fact rather than an interpretation. When we're feeling lonely, the thought, "Nobody really cares about me," can seem like an obvious conclusion rather than one possible perspective among many. But here's what cognitive behavioral therapy has taught us. Thoughts are not facts. They're mental events like clouds passing through the sky of our consciousness. Some thoughts are helpful, some are neutral, and some are actively harmful to our well-being. Learning to distinguish between these different types of thoughts is like learning to distinguish between different types of weather. We don't have to take shelter every time we see a cloud, but we might want to grab an umbrella if we see storm clouds gathering. The process of retraining our inner voice is a lot like learning a new language. At first, it feels awkward and unnatural. We have to consciously think about each word, each phrase. But gradually, with practice, it becomes more fluid, more automatic. The new patterns start to feel as natural as the old ones once did. What would it sound like if our inner voice spoke to us the way a wise, compassionate friend would? Instead of, "You're so stupid for making that mistake," it might say, "That didn't go as planned, but everyone makes mistakes. What can we learn from this?" Instead of, "You'll never be good enough," it might say, "Growth takes time, and you're making progress, even if it doesn't always feel that way." This isn't about lying to ourselves or ignoring real problems. It's about developing a more balanced perspective, one that acknowledges difficulties without catastrophizing them, one that recognizes our flaws without defining us by them. Epictetus, who knew something about hardship, he was born a slave and lived with physical disabilities, understood this balance. He taught that we suffer not from events themselves, but from our judgments about events. Change the judgment, and you change the suffering. Sometimes people worry that being kinder to themselves will make them lazy or complacent. They think that harsh self-criticism is what motivates them to improve. But research in psychology suggests the opposite. Self-compassion actually increases motivation and resilience. When we feel safe and supported, even by our own inner voice, we're more likely to take healthy risks, to learn from mistakes, and to persist through challenges. Think about it this way: which coach would help you improve more? One who constantly criticized your every move, or one who acknowledged your efforts, pointed out areas for growth, and encouraged you to keep trying? The harsh critic might get short-term compliance, but the supportive coach builds long-term capability and confidence. Our inner voice can learn to be that supportive coach. It can learn to notice our efforts, not just our outcomes. It can learn to put setbacks in perspective, to see them as temporary rather than permanent, specific rather than global. It can learn to speak to us with the same kindness we would show to someone we care about. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. Like any skill, it requires practice, patience, and persistence. Some days our old mental habits will feel stronger than our new ones. Some days the critical voice will seem louder than the compassionate one. This is normal, expected, part of the process. Marcus Aurelius himself had to remind himself daily of the principles he wanted to live by. Even the wisest among us need regular practice to maintain mental discipline. The practice begins with awareness. Throughout the day, we can start to notice the quality of our inner dialogue. Is it helpful or harmful? Is it realistic or distorted? Is it kind or cruel? We don't need to judge ourselves for having unhelpful thoughts. That would just be another layer of criticism. We can simply observe with curiosity rather than judgment. When we notice a particularly harsh or unhelpful thought, we can pause and ask ourselves, is this thought accurate? Is it helpful? What would I say to a friend in this situation? These questions create a little space between us and our automatic reactions, a moment of choice where we can respond rather than simply react. Sometimes the most powerful intervention is simply to acknowledge that we're having a difficult moment. Instead of fighting against painful emotions or trying to think our way out of them, we can recognize them as part of the human experience. This is hard right now, we might say to ourselves. This is what sadness feels like. This is what anxiety feels like. It's uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous, and it will pass. Seneca wrote, "It is likely that some troubles will befall us, but it is not a present fact." How often has the unexpected happened? How often has the expected never come to pass? Our minds are constantly generating predictions about the future, most of which never come true. Learning to hold these predictions lightly as possibilities rather than certainties can free us from a great deal of unnecessary suffering. The inner voice that serves us best is one that can acknowledge reality without being overwhelmed by it. It can recognize problems without catastrophizing them. It can feel emotions without being controlled by them. It can make plans without being attached to specific outcomes. And this kind of mental flexibility is what the Stoics called wisdom, and what modern psychology calls emotional regulation. Developing this flexibility takes time, but every moment offers a new opportunity to practice. When we're stuck in traffic, instead of letting our inner voice spiral into frustration about being late, we can practice acceptance of what we cannot control. When we make a mistake at work, instead of letting our inner voice launch into a litany of self-criticism, we can practice self-compassion and problem-solving. The goal isn't to eliminate all negative thoughts or difficult emotions. That would be neither possible nor desirable. Negative emotions serve important functions. They alert us to problems, motivate us to make changes, and help us connect with others who are struggling. The goal is to develop a more balanced relationship with our thoughts and emotions, one where we can experience them without being overwhelmed by them. This balance is beautifully captured in a phrase from Marcus Aurelius: "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together." Notice that he doesn't say to like everything that happens, or to pretend that difficulties aren't difficult. He says to accept them, to work with reality as it is rather than as we wish it were. Our inner voice can learn this kind of acceptance. It can learn to say, "This isn't what I wanted, but it's what's happening, so how can I respond skillfully?" It can learn to say, "I'm feeling anxious right now, and that's okay. Anxiety is just information. What is it trying to tell me?" It can learn to say, "I made a mistake and I feel disappointed. That's human. What can I learn from this experience?" This kind of inner dialogue doesn't come naturally to most of us. We have to cultivate it deliberately, like tending a garden. We have to plant new seeds of thought, water them with attention and practice, and patiently weed out the old patterns that no longer serve us. Some days the garden will look beautiful, and some days it will look like a mess. Both are part of the process. The beautiful thing about this work is that it's always available to us. We don't need special equipment or perfect conditions. We don't need to wait for the right moment or the right mood. Right now, in this very moment, we can choose to speak to ourselves with a little more kindness, a little more wisdom, a little more compassion. What would change if we treated our inner voice like a dear friend who's been through everything with us? What would change if we spoke to ourselves with the same patience we show to a child who's learning something new? What would change if we offered ourselves the same forgiveness we would offer to someone we love? Epictetus taught his students that we are not our thoughts, we are the observers of our thoughts. This distinction is profound. We are not the voice in our head, we are the awareness that hears the voice. This awareness has the power to listen, to evaluate, to choose which thoughts to follow and which to let pass by like clouds in the sky. From this place of awareness, we can begin to consciously shape our inner dialogue. We can choose thoughts that serve our well-being and our growth. We can choose interpretations that empower rather than diminish us. We can choose a narrative that acknowledges our struggles while also recognizing our strength, our resilience, our capacity for change. This isn't about becoming perfect or eliminating all mental suffering. It's about becoming more skillful in how we relate to our own minds. It's about developing an inner voice that can be both honest and kind, both realistic and hopeful, both grounded in the present and oriented toward growth. The Stoics believed that this kind of mental training was the most important work a person could do. They saw it as the foundation of a good life, the source of genuine freedom and peace. Modern psychology has confirmed much of what they intuited. Our thoughts shape our emotions influence our actions, and our actions create our lives. By training our inner voice, we're not just changing our thoughts, we're changing our entire experience of being alive. We're creating the conditions for greater happiness, deeper relationships, more meaningful work, and a more profound sense of purpose. We're learning to be our own best friend, our own wisest counselor, our own most reliable source of comfort and encouragement. This transformation is both simple and profound. Simple because it requires nothing more than paying attention to our thoughts and choosing more helpful ones. Profound because it changes everything about how we experience life. When our inner voice becomes an ally rather than an enemy, when it becomes a source of wisdom rather than worry, when it becomes a companion rather than a critic, we discover a kind of freedom that no external circumstance can take away. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. The way we think, the way we talk to ourselves, the stories we tell about our experiences, these are the raw materials of our happiness or our suffering. By learning to work skillfully with these materials, we can craft a life of greater peace, purpose, and joy. The voice that follows us everywhere doesn't have to be a burden. It can become our greatest asset, our most trusted guide, our most faithful companion on the journey of life. All it takes is the willingness to listen, to learn, and to practice speaking to ourselves with the wisdom and compassion we all deserve.